Walt, this week, the Foreign Autonomy Desk is the star of the show. And I know you're very, very excited to tell us about your beloved Eagles and their win and your adventures to Manhattan with Tesla FSD. Then there's the Waymo beep beep issues around depots. And Uber's launched service in Abu Dhabi with WeRide, fully driverless. Let's start in the Middle East. Foreign Autonomy Desk starts now. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the Eagles are coming off a loss to the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm hoping the reason you're talking about the Eagles win is because we released this on Saturday and hopefully they will have won on Friday against the Chicago Bears because our recording time is before that game has happened. So I appreciate that good karma. But yes, let us move from the streets of Philadelphia to the streets of Abu Dhabi. Big win, I think, for two companies, really, Uber and WeRide, launching service in Abu Dhabi. That is the first market outside of the United States where Uber has had a market. And for WeRide, obviously a big win. And if you look at that press release, that joint press release, there's a picture in there, which you can see behind me. That is a ton of cars, Grayson. This is not a 5 or 10 car launch. It appears that there are a ton of cars that are launching. So what are your initial thoughts?
Not to paraphrase somebody, it's huge, the launch. It's a lot of cars. Positive step for Uber. Just to clarify, it is their first fully driverless launch outside of the United States because they have had other robotaxi launches, but they've had safety drivers. So there's no safety driver, no safety attendant. So good move for Uber on there. It is a very positive step. And let's go back in time. WeRide first started operating in Abu Dhabi in 2021. 4 years to go drive route. Long time, but they did it. But it's another catalyst of Uber's expansion to the UAE and Europe.
I think it also gives Uber an opportunity to flex that they are, in fact, a global company. A lot of times we get, tied up in the drama that exists with Waymo in the United States. Obviously, still a very important market for them, but a good opportunity for them to flex that. Also, Grayson, I noticed that the cars back here are more like minivans, more of the form factor that I appreciate. I know you're not as high on those type of cars. What are your thoughts on the form factor?
It's amazing what you can do when you have government subsidies to build vehicles. That's what I'll say on that. On the form factor, it works. It's practical. Is it my favorite? No. Somebody should go rise the ghost of Lee Iacocca because the minivan is back. Now, somebody's got to do the town and country version. Then we're cooking, Walt. Now we're cooking.
I mean, it looks kind of like a town and country. It looks kind of generic, but for, at the end of the day, it is utilitarian. It's comfort. It's, it's the room you need. Maybe it's going to be more about shared ride than individual rides there, Grayson.
It's not just the expansion of going driver out in Abu Dhabi. WeRide reported earnings, and you covered it. What did you uncover in their earnings report?
For me, there's a lot that they said. There was two things that stuck out. First, on the remote safety driver, which they hope to at some point get to 10-1, meaning that for every 10 WeRide cars on the road, you'd have one remote driver there for those moments that the car can't figure out what to do. It's still a 3-1. So still some work to do there from a technology perspective. 3-1 still good. 10-1 is at least that company's target. The other big thing was the update on the supply and meaning number of cars that are in the market. So as of the third quarter, they had 1,600 autonomous vehicles in the market. For context, the last quarter, the number was 1,300. The quarter before that was 1,200. So really, since the first quarter, they've only added about 400 autonomous vehicles. And within the subset of that, of those 1,600 that are on the road, only 750, or less than half, are robotaxis. And that supply has only grown from 500 to 750. So when we talk about the importance of supply, and you've heard us all, talk about this a lot in the context of Waymo. Let's look at WeRide here, which is like, again, 1,600 total, 750. That compares to what, 2,500 that Waymo has? And frankly, the growth trajectory from this Chinese technology company is frankly just not as steep as what Waymo is delivering in the market.
Why do you think it's so slow? And then I asked that too. One, the ramp is slow, but then is seemingly the press department at WeRide is on a roll here, announcing new markets, and this goes back to where the vehicle's going to come from.
In terms of where the supply comes from, I mean, WeRide heavily sourced through Chinese OEM partners like, is it GAC or GAC? I'm not even sure how you pronounce it. Waymo, well documented in terms of Jaguar, Zeekr, right, Chinese, as well as waiting for Hyundai. And also, when you think about it, when WeRide is scaling, I don't know how many of those cars that they will scale with these Chinese OEM partners, whether that applies to all these additional markets which WeRide have talked about, whether it's, you know, Zurich or Belgium for the Robobus or things like that.
Is the Robobus still a thing? Are they still doing that? Because the vans hypothetically could replace the Robobus.
I don't recall if they gave a breakdown of them. I mean, they showed the pictures of them, and there's important. I know you recently did a podcast with Glideways in terms of the need for smaller vehicles in terms of mass transportation, not larger vehicles. So there wasn't a breakdown of the 800 or 900 or so autonomous vehicles that are not robotaxis between buses and vans. I mean, I'm kind of sold on the Glideways concept of over time needing smaller vehicles on demand as opposed to larger vehicles.
That's a very valid point, because if larger vehicles were the answer, this is just hypothetical, Toyota would have scaled the e-Pallet much faster, which is a 14 person van. But staying on the theme of scaling, WeRide's biggest Chinese competitor outside of Baidu, Pony, they're expanding with Bolt. What have you learned about that?
Well, Pony also reported earnings. And again, since we're talking numbers, and this should be fresh in everyone's mind, when you put the context of those numbers, Pony's talking about tripling its robotaxi fleet by the end of next year to over 3,000 vehicles. But that just implies that they have less than 1,000 today relative to the 1,600, you know, and the 2,500, the 1,600 at WeRide and the 2,500 at Waymo. So for them, it's the ramp to 3,000. The question, Grayson, is end of 26. Let's say Pony does get to 3,000. Where's Waymo going to be? Where's WeRide going to be? And where's some of the other competitors going to be? Where will those volumes head?
Waymo will be over 5,000 or 6,000 with a caveat if the Hyundai vehicles start coming online. That's where I think they'll be. Pony unsure, WeRide unsure, just don't have enough insight into the supply chain, into the manufacturing relationships. A little opaque over there, don't have that. What do you think?
So still small numbers, right? So, I mean, I think the advantage here maybe go to WeRide given the Chinese partnerships, but again, relevance to competition with Waymo, which has access to broader markets than just like feeding into the U.S. market. And to your point with Pony, again, a different competitor partnering with Bolt, there are differences between Pony and WeRide. Pony's trying to get cars off the balance sheet in China with Sunlight Mobility and off its own app in Europe with Bolt, where WeRide, is more of a vertically integrated approach. It has its own licenses in Abu Dhabi, Zurich, and other places. So Pony's basically like say, let others own the cars and customers who sell autonomy, kind of like more of the U.S. approach, and WeRide is kind of more of the vertically integrated approach. Which wins?
I don't know. Ed Olson came on the podcast yesterday, which I'll be releasing later this month, and so he's trying to offload all the assets. What do you look like from an investor standpoint, when you meet with investors in funds? Is it say, okay, we want the asset light company, or do we want to have the Apple company? And you do such a great job covering Apple. And for our listeners and viewers, from time to time, Walt writes really great notes on Apple. So check him out. The Tim Cook one recently, Walt, was well done. Where do you think this is going? Vertically integrated or partnership heavy?
I mean, that's obviously a rhetorical question because investors always prefer to get the highest return on capital. And it's harder to do that when you're a capital intensive business. It takes a longer term to get that. The challenge with that is, you know, sometimes the vertically integrated companies are the ones that can push their products first and gain the share, right? Because they are taking on the responsibility of ownership. And that, I think, to a certain extent becomes important. But look at Uber. I mean, Uber's owning cars in a lot of these partnerships, capital intensive now, with long-term plans to offlay that. So I think my gut tells me that the initial strategy that probably works better is the vertically integrated one to get these things off the ground. Again, you know, saying this over and over, we're still very early days in this. The field is still generally wide open. highlighting these numbers, these actual numbers of cars on the road and what those experiences are, is important in doing that. But Grayson, the other aspect of tracking what goes on the market is footprint, right? And where these things are approved, because there's regulatory aspects, and later we'll get into supporting these cars. Waymo just got a massive expansion. I think it occurred right after we recorded last week in California down to San Diego. What are your thoughts on that in terms of, Waymo's, usability as a service?
My honest thoughts are well done to the Waymo policy team. The Waymo has done a really great job of building trust with a gentleman named Bernard Soriano at the California DMV, along with the California Public Utilities Commission. They built trust in California. The DMV approval is a clear expression of that trust that they've built. And I believe, personally, having spent a lot of my life in policy, it's going to be very hard for other companies to get to the level of trust that Waymo currently has now with the state of California, the California Public Utilities Commission, and the California DMV. And, well, that could be an overall competitive advantage as it relates to deploying robotaxis in the Golden State.
Well, before we applaud California too much, we'll get to Santa Monica later and what's happening there. But let's talk about this massive footprint. And it is a massive footprint. Now, Tesla bulls will tell you, like, oh, we've got this massive footprint. You still have a safety driver there. So, simmer down for now. This massive one in terms of Waymo, and also the amount of cars that they have operating there relative to where Tesla is, even with the safety driver. They're going to ramp more cars. What type of additional infrastructure do they need to put in there in order to service that area? Because, I've been on some of those roads out to Lafayette and beyond, and I think, further down, like if people, this is great for longer trips, but like what type of infrastructure is in place or getting put in place? There's been no announcements on that front.
Before we get to the infrastructure, you're going to need a lot of vehicles, and I'll give you a number. It's a very large number. You'll need, I would say, between 5,000 to 6,500 vehicles to cover that entire service area, if that is indeed truly turned on. And from an infrastructure standpoint, you're going to need, I'll use the term nodes. You're going to need depots, say San Diego, LA, Napa. You're going to need a lot of the depots there. So it's a massive service area. How do you think they're going to be able to service it?
I don't know. It's a challenge, right? And, the other issue is you just said that for that service area alone, they're going to need 5,000 or 6,000 cars. And as a quick reminder, Grayson, earlier in this very podcast, you said that they're only going to get to 5,000 total, right, across all of their markets. So we have a press release where neither of us can really figure out maybe the plans for the infrastructure. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be the supply there. So why even announce this other than basically a good PR win for the policy team to basically lock? I mean, obviously you want to lock it in. So I guess that's the issue, right? You just lock it in because you can, but like, is there probably not going to be service there for some time?
It's a flex move. Obviously, because it's California Department of Motor Vehicles, it would become public. So I get putting it out, but it's also a flex move. Because of the limited number of vehicles that we project to the end of next year, I could see a scenario where people are going to send bows and arrows now, where certain vehicles are geofenced to the areas, and then perhaps a small percentage, 5%, 6%, are able to go to longer distances, and perhaps that's how they do it, if they do indeed do it. While we don't know how they're going to operate it, we do know that they are running into issues with some of the infrastructure in Santa Monica around the beeping. Do you know what the beeping is, Walt? Do you know why the Waymo vehicles have to beep?
I mean, I had a friend that claimed that his grandmother, Grandma Moon or something, was the one that was hit by a truck that was in reverse, and she's the reason why there's these beeping on the road. I don't know whether he was telling me a tall tale or not. It was something he would tell us in college often. He was very insistent upon it. But yes, the beeping is for when the car is in reverse. Maybe in this case, the beeping is for something else.
Tall tales are Paul Bunyan and the Blue Ox. So that's a tall tale there. It is a NHTSA regulation when the vehicle backs up, so individuals know that it is coming. Did you also know that electric vehicles have to make noise, even driving, because that is a NHTSA regulation? And I'll give you a little side note here. Did you know the most dangerous car way back when it first came out was the Toyota Prius? Do you know why?
Because it was so quiet that people would not hear it coming?
It was the number one drive-by vehicle for drive-by shootings in South LA when it first came out.
Oh, God.
Police took notice. And so that's why you start to have these noise on the electric vehicle. So that's one incident. There's other very public documented incidents.
I did not expect the fact that I learned today was going to be that the Prius used to be a gangbanger car. So thank you for that. That is my one to grow on for Thanksgiving. I mean, look, there's got to be fixes here, but this is just the challenge of putting depots in neighborhoods. I mean, I've been to these depots in Los Angeles. They are in dense residential neighborhoods, as they have to be. I don't know if you needed that many cars. There was up to 56 JAGs in those depots. Maybe the issue is to disperse those cars in terms of their volumes. And on their return to the lot, why are they all returning at the same time? That should be something that with basic planning and basic software in terms of fleet management. I mean, look, it's funny, like Uber and others are trying to push their fleet management software, things on fleet owners. And that's going to be another way for them to make money. These fleet owners have to look for alternatives out there because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. If I'm a fleet manager, I own 20, 30 cars per lot. They're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. So they can't, they can't have 56 cars coming into their lot at the same time, because either the Waymo software or the Uber software that those guys are trying to push on them, they should be looking for independent software that enables them to do that effectively.
No. It's not the software issue. Well, let's go inside baseball, go under the Komodo. There is a land grab going on now around LAX, the airport, industrial. The LAX airport is divided. On one side of LAX, you have DWP, Department of Water and Power, and on the other side of the airport, you have SoCal Edison. Some of the largest institutional funds are buying up that land looking to put depots. Waymo has been boxed out of that, believe it or not. So they're having to look for alternatives. That is the true reason why. But if you look at the Santa Monica map, you can go up Colorado Avenue by the old Yahoo Media office, by the old Sony Music. There is corporate areas to put the depots. I think it really just comes down to better planning and trying to get ahead of this before you announce a market. I'm just this hypothetical, secure the land.
First of all, I've been to a Waymo depot that was near the airport. I mean, you could literally see the airport there. There was rental car things. It's not a Waymo. Waymo's not getting boxed out because they don't own it, right? This is the debate we've had on this podcast. It's their partners that are trying to secure these things. And the third thing is, like, LA traffic is disgusting. So you can't put your supply all by the airport. It would take forever to send those cars. It's inefficient. There has to be other areas. The difference is, on the multiple depots that I saw in LA, there's some like the one in Santa Monica that are in dense residential areas. There's other ones by the airport. In the one in Austin that we saw with a Waymo out, in an light industrial park, it's finding the right locations and allocating the right amount of cars, and then being able to process those cars quickly. This is exactly what Lyft talk about with FlexDrive in terms of efficiency. Maybe if those 56 JAGs in Santa Monica were processed quickly, they wouldn't be sitting there beeping because they were coming in one like a race car depot and sending them out. I mean, this is, again, sorry to be repetitive for the longtime listeners, but a critical element of, as this business scales, that these companies have to get right. And I think it's a risk for Waymo and Uber and others to allow third parties to do this rather than taking ownership.
Bingo. Yes, it is a risk. And also from a planning perspective, this is hypothetical. Obviously, this is the NHTSA regulation with the beep beep. Maybe you could turn it off, maybe you couldn't. I'm not going to override NHTSA on that. But what if you design the depots as a drive-through to be passed through? Then you eliminate that beeping. That just comes down to A&E, architectural engineering planning at the end of the day.
All fixable. But I mean, I don't know. It's not like they have 20 depots in LA. So if they're shutting down Santa Monica, how is that going to impact service? That's got to be a setback. I've already been sent pictures of what Waymo is doing in Dallas. Seems very small, right? Not scaling up like we saw in Austin for what they did with Avomo. Who knows what the latest is on the Avomo relationship? Why is Avomo not building Dallas for them and something similar that that they've done in Austin? So it's clearly something to watch.
The relationship is clearly complicated, as we've documented on this podcast many times, but as you clearly stated, you need to own and control the operations in-house to truly be able to scale this, because I'm not sure relying on partners for everything is the right answer.
So another company that I think is probably, behind the curve in having a plan for putting the infrastructure in place for a future autonomous fleet is our friends over at Tesla. I know there was Elon tweeted out this week that the fleet is going to double in December. I'm not sure. What does doubling mean, first off, in Austin? Grayson, what do you think?
The chatter on X, this is chatter on X, is going from 30 vehicles to 60 vehicles, but we cannot independently verify that.
I mean, but the bottom line is 60 is more or less, not that much in terms of handling it. You can deal with tents and things like that. That's not, a real number for that market, especially given how that ODD has expanded. And let's put things in perspective. We're coming up on December here. The the most recent promise was to serve around half the population across 8 to 10 metros by year end. We're still in Austin with maybe 30 to 650 cars, still with a driver in the passenger seat, the safety attendant, as we like to call it. But so I think for them, the focus is let's nail all that stuff down first before we worry about logistics. But how are you feeling about Tesla's ability, let's say first to get that safety attendant out in Austin, and then hitting more of that hundreds of numbers that we were hoping for by the middle of next year?
I do believe and that they will hit safety attendant out by the end of the year, but I'll say that with a caveat, it's probably going to be in a smaller ODD than most individuals are expecting. That's what I think. When they ramp, don't know. And I do not believe it's going to be the cybercab that's purely based on NHTSA regulations, Part 555 exemptions, and everything that goes along with that. But the ramp is going to be a lot slower than bulls think. And I said it.
I don't think how many weeks ago, I'm sure some of our listeners will figure out exactly what episode. It wasn't long ago, though, that the both of us thought by the middle of next year that they would hit in the hundreds. I'm going to stick with it. I still think that they can get to that in the middle of next year, regardless of whether the safety attendant goes out. So are you pulling off that prediction as well, Grayson?
No, I'm staying with the hundreds of vehicles. I think it's going to be a mixed fleet where you have some fully driverless, no human. You'll have some with safety attendant, and then perhaps some you'll have safety drivers, depending on the market. So yes, hundreds of vehicles, I'm sticking to that.
Here on this podcast, we don't just agree with what each other say. So I'm going to get pushed back and I don't think that was your initial prediction. I think your initial prediction was hundreds with no safety driver and no safety attendant by the middle of next year. But whatever, we know where you're at now. I'm saying for me, I'm now the more bullish one. I think they hit hundreds of cars in Austin, no safety attendant, no safety driver, just, a robotaxi service by the middle of next year.
Okay, so let's double down on this. Do they add one or two additional markets outside of Austin with no safety attendant, no safety driver next year?
I think they're going to add markets, and it'll be like Austin was originally launched with a safety attendant in those markets. It's got to be a huge unlock for them, to get that safety attendant out in Austin. Conceptually for the company, I mean, look, we could be wrong. This thing could drag into next year, maybe end of next year. Certainly always a possibility, but we'll see. We'll see how it progresses. I think if they go and they get to attend it out, then there should be no issue with hitting several markets next year, initially with the safety attendant in, and then ultimately by the end of the year moving the attendant out.
So then I'll just go on the record and say those markets will be Arizona, Texas, probably Dallas, Florida, Miami, and perhaps Las Vegas. But that would be pushing it towards the end of the year.
I love it. And one of the reasons that I'm getting more confident about it is because Grayson and I got 14.2 last week. And I also had the opportunity to take that Tesla into New York City. And the only mode I think that makes sense for New York City is Mad Max. And, I can say that it was crazy how good that performed in the city in terms of, how like there's always someone double parked in and out of the double park, people cutting you off. It drove, I want to say like an aggressive, but like a taxi cab driver in terms of its willingness to change lanes quickly, and safely throughout the city. In fact, there was at one point where I got impatient because there was actually a left turn light, and I was going to, you can basically hit the gas pedal to tell the car to go if it's going to like stop at a stop sign where it has to roll to a complete stop. I was going to tell it to go, and then the car stopped me again. And I hadn't noticed that actually New York City had installed in this particular intersection a left turn signal that stopped the car. So always Tesla showing me that it's a better driver than I am. But I was very impressed, or I have been very impressed since going to FIP 14.2, not only in how it's doing in the city, this kind of stuttering, braking has stopped. There's still issues, right? That 14.2 is not a robotaxi software. Why? It like when it pulls out of my driveway or when it pulls out of my garage, it does some funky things. It's not, the navigation to the destinations is not perfect. 14.2 is not your, get to the, robotaxi level. But in terms of its performance, it is, I think, very close.
You put it in Mad Max in New York. Were you channeling Robert De Niro in Taxi?
It is an amazing experience to be in a self-driven car in New York City. It's something to experience.
Since I've lived in the city for years, I'm going to ask a few things. You do the crosstown traffic. Did you do up by Central Park? You do downtown? Was it only pockets?
We went through Central Park. Yes. No, it was mostly up. I mean, we didn't get to the worst midtown traffic. I wasn't doing crosstown traffic through Times Square and waiting for that kind of mess. But I mean, it was pretty... Hit the FDR, right? Which is kind of a crazy road. 87, for those familiar with it, very aggressive drivers, lots of random, turnoffs one way or another. But again, like in the city streets themselves, which ironically, if you think about it, like your speed can only get so fast. It's more about this swerving. And in this scenario, I mean, it seems like that technology is well suited for these streets. Much different than San Francisco. Obviously, Waymo does great in San Francisco, but the craziness of New York City is different.
New mayor comes in, sworn in next year. What's your over/under? Does Waymo launch service in New York next year, or does the political powers overcome it?
Well, I don't think the mayor has anything to do with it. I think they've got their own supply and pacing issues that they need to work through versus the mayor. But look, as FSD moves forward and more people adopt FSD in their own car usage, like it'll, you're going to get a lot of learning miles from people like me that have gotten 14.2 driving New York City and allowing it to drive there. I just felt a lot safer with the autonomy of the FSD on than I did if I had to manage, getting through that traffic safely.
You bring up a good point. It's something that I've been debating over the dinner table here. I'd love to get your take on. Obviously, FSD is becoming better than a human driver, better than your average human driver. Do you feel that when you drive, you're not as good a driver because you're so used to using FSD?
I only drive the Tesla now, and the vast majority of the time, it's on FSD. As a matter of fact, I'll be able to share that with listeners over time because Tesla now tells you what percentage of your time you're on FSD versus self-driving. So I don't know if that's helping me drive, at some point, if I get into a car that doesn't have FSD, and I don't know if that makes me better or worse, but I know that when I'm in that situation with FSD on and I'm supervising it, right? So I'm watching it. It's just, I feel more calm. It's like you're sitting in the passenger seat, right? And the person drives and you have the ability to hit the brake if the person drives potentially in front of a car. Having that second set of eyes where it's the primary driver, to me, just makes me feel safer. I don't know if everyone feels that way, but for me, it does. Obviously, there's probably some control freaks out there that always prefer to drive, and maybe this sits in the background for them. But for me, I prefer to be the supervisor. And the drive itself is just much smoother.
You're right. And you bring up a very valid point. I use FSD all the time, and over time we'll disclose how much we actually use it. We have it in the data now. When I was in California a few weeks ago, Lucid very kindly gave me an Air to drive. It felt weird. It's like I have to drive this thing. It felt antiquated. Where you're so used to being the supervisor, you go when you actually go to drive a vehicle, like, oh, this is odd. What's wrong with this? It's just it's such a changing moment in history that we're going to look back on this and say, you had to drive a car? What's wrong with you? It's going to change a lot of things.
And I think the other important thing, Grayson, is like when we've, a lot of people, there's going to be those that say, Tesla's the best technology. Now there's going to say it's all a fraud. Same thing with Waymo. Waymo's the best. And then when we ask the engineers, and there's varying opinion in the engineering community, and we talk to these companies, a lot of them, and I say like, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to look in the code? How am I supposed to figure it out? And in nearly every situation, the answer from the smartest people is like, well, just get in the cars and use it. Use the product and see how it drives. So that's what we do. We get in these cars. And for the Tesla haters out there, like, get in an FSD car. Like, you can't tell me that that is not a relevant data point when you get in this car and you feel how it drives and deal with the unique situations that come up, whether it's in the suburbs or in the city. Or go to these other car companies and get in there. And you and I have both experienced some, not great situations, in certain scenarios in some of these competing technologies.
Like Walt said, if you want to learn about the technology, experience the technology. We analyze it here, but you should experience it where you live. Walt, what do we need to look for next week besides your hopefully Eagles win? What else do we need to look for?
I think all eyes are now going to be shifting to Tesla, right? I mean, Waymo can keep announcing markets, whatever. It's as you know, for us, the supply issue. We're always hoping to get more info on the supply side. And we'll do more work on that as we're heading into CES. I think that'll give us more data points to get a better sense of what the supply ramp can be for Waymo. Understanding more about the Waymo relationship with Uber. But again, I think it's December. I mean, Tesla is on the clock, right? So they're going to experience a lot of criticism if we get to the end of the year and we still have that safety attendant in Austin.
You said all eyes on Tesla. It reminded me of Tupac, all eyes on me. All eyes are on Tesla. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is riding. Walt, until next week,